put his badge on the line for justice.
You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him, because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
Sometimes the truth has a price. That may be the lesson of a Virginia police officer who says, in trying to do the right thing, he ended up paying for it.
The message you're sending is, see, we did it, Doug. You don't come out, you don't buck the system. No matter what the reason is, you just can basically keep your mouth shut. But if I wouldn't do it all over again, I would take the badge and I would leave it on somebody's desk and get out of police work. Because the day I can tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, and the day the system doesn't want me to tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, is the day I'd leave the badge on the desk and walk away.
Poppa was fired for insubordination. One man who confronted truth and consequences.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Doug Poppa, Truth and Consequences podcast.
Professor Eli Silverman, an expert on policing at John Jay College.
But there's a different kind of corruption in many cases. And for example, in 2000, there's a city agency called the Commission to Combat Police Corruption. Okay? In 2005, they requested this NYPD to reveal its crime statistics. Why? Because they heard that some of the statistics were being corrupted. Okay? Misled, fooled around with, however you want to label it. What happened, the police department refused to disclose this information, said it wasn't within their purview. So one constant is the defensiveness of any law enforcement agency to wall off it. So corruption has a cyclical nature.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 93 for Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. You just heard Professor Eli Silverman speaking on corruption and the manipulating of police crime statistics. On November 14, 2021, I published episode 74, which was another exclusive investigative news story by Truth and Consequences that was titled, Vegas Police Ordered to Downgrade Violent Crimes, Falsify Reports. One cop refused. I will have the link to episode 74 in the description section of this podcast for you to review if you're not already familiar with it. As I stated in episode 74, the Las Vegas Metro police officer who refused an unlawful order and did not falsify his police report was former robbery detective and 25-year member of the force, Eddie Leneve. For his heroism, Leneve was awarded the Las Vegas Metro Police Meritorious Service Award in 2000 for his action that February during a heavy rainstorm when he was told that there was a submerged vehicle that might still have a person inside. Leneve dove into the flooding waters and swam down to the vehicle only to find that the person had already escaped before he dove into the water. Back in 2007, then Detective Eddie Leneve and his partner, Detective Andy Caldwell, conducted the criminal investigation that led to the arrest and conviction of O.J. Simpson for robbery and other charges. Andy Caldwell, now retired, wrote an excellent account of the O.J. Simpson criminal investigation in his book titled Room 1203, O.J. Simpson's Las Vegas Conviction. It is well worth the read. According to police sources, after my podcast was published, Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who runs the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, ordered Deputy Chief Andrew Walsh to contact Eddie Leneve and ascertain if Leneve was the source for my expose. I was told that Walsh asked Leneve if he knew who I was, did he speak to me, and was he the police officer who leaked the information to me. In my opinion, it was nothing short of harassment and an intimidation factor. Apparently, the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution hasn't made its way to the desk of Sheriff Lombardo. Lombardo, through his underling, Deputy Chief Andrew Walsh, went fishing in the wrong lake. Here's the way I look at it, folks. The order for police officers to downgrade and falsify robbery and rape crimes came directly from corrupt Sheriff Joe Lombardo, according to police sources. I was also told that Lombardo has a dislike for Leneve and wanted to boot Leneve from the airport bureau after my podcast was published, because Lombardo had his mind made up that Leneve was the source for my story. The only person who needs to be booted is Lombardo, right out of any future public office. If Deputy Chief Walsh had the least bit of intestinal fortitude and/or integrity, he should have told Lombardo to shove it, because it was Lombardo and his command staff officers, to include his then undersheriff Kevin McMahill, who were all complicit in the falsifying of police reports to downgrade robbery and rape crimes from felonies to misdemeanor crimes. They knowingly ordered police officers to violate their own departmental policies as to truthfulness and the falsifying of police reports, notwithstanding the fact that they are sending false crime statistics to the U.S. Department of Justice. Eddie Leneve is not only a hero because he was awarded the department's Meritorious Service Award, but Leneve is also a hero because he stood tall and did the right thing when he refused to falsify his police report. How about awarding Eddie Leneve a Medal for Integrity, one of the core values of the Las Vegas Metro Police, that the head of the department, Sheriff Lombardo, threw out the window with his cover-ups and lies? Police officers have a moral and ethical responsibility to let the public know when there are misdeeds afoot in their police department. In this case, they were told to manipulate crime reports, so Sheriff Lombardo can use that for his own personal and/or political agenda. It is pure corruption, folks, just like you heard Professor Silverman state at the opening of this episode. When Lombardo ordered Deputy Chief Walsh to make contact with Leneve, Lombardo, in effect, further corroborated my expose. Besides being corrupt and a liar, Lombardo solidified just how incompetent he is when he had Walsh contact Leneve. Lombardo wasn't the least bit worried that he ordered police officers to falsify reports, but rather his concern was, who leaked that to me? The following is an excerpt from episode 92 that was titled, NYPD Internal Affairs Detective Talks Working Undercover, Corruption Destroying Files. At the conclusion of that, I'll have my closing comments. We just heard William Nolan say that the mission of the NYPD Internal Affairs Division is to protect the police commissioner and the people that the commissioner designates to get protection. Folks, that sounds very similar to what police officers have told me over the years that occurs in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Cover-ups by past and present sheriffs who run the Las Vegas Metro Police to protect themselves, certain police personnel, and the image of the department. As one example of the several cover-ups that I have exposed to date, episode 54 that was titled Vegas Police Cover-Up Uncovered, Negligence Led to Kidnapping Rape of 12-Year-Old Girl. I follow that exclusive story up in episodes 56 and 82. I'm already into an hour of this episode, so I will discuss another cover-up that I will be exposing for the first time here, albeit briefly, that is more specific and falls right in line with William Nolan's comments about internal affairs shit-canning investigations. Bear with me, folks, for a few minutes, and you'll understand where I'm going with this. On October 25, 2017, the Baltimore Post-Examiner published my story that was titled, Who is in Charge of the Las Vegas Mandalay Bay Shooting Investigation? In that story, I wrote that the death of gunman Stephen Paddock would normally be investigated by detectives from the Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Bureau. However, I was told by a retired police official that the death investigation was pulled from homicide detectives and given to the department's Force Investigation Team that was commanded at the time by then Captain Kelly McMahill, who was the wife of then LVMPD Undersheriff Kevin McMahill, Sheriff Lombardo's number 2 man in charge. After that story was published on November 22, 2017, at 7:14 a.m., I received an email from Las Vegas Metro Police Internal Affairs Detective David Goris. Goris wrote, believe it or not, that he wanted to talk to me about my sources for the story. Later that day, I called Detective Goris. Here is the audio recording of my conversation with Detective Goris that was recorded with his knowledge.
Detective Goris, Doug Poppa?
Hey, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Just to let you know this line's recorded.
Okay.
Okay. What's up?
The reason I sent you an email is basically I've been tasked with an internal investigation, so nothing criminal. And we're trying to ascertain if one of our active duty police officers is providing information. So your article came up. There's two, one for Los Angeles and one for, I forget the other one, maybe Baltimore?
Baltimore, sure.
But they're written by you, and basically it says in there, retired police official. Obviously, retired police official is not an active duty police official, but so I'm just trying to reach out to you and see if you would be at liberty to divulge who was providing that information to you.
No, I can't do that. They're confidential sources.
Okay. And then a little bit further down, it says that you reached out to or somebody reached out, contacted the LVMPD Homicide Division, and inquired who was handling it, and they were told that the force investigation team. I was just trying to find out if that was you that made that phone call, or if you knew who made that phone call and who from the LVMPD Homicide Division said that the force investigation team was handling the investigation.
That was me, and that was the Homicide Division.
Do you remember if it was one of the ladies that answered, like one of the front secretaries, or if you spoke to a specific detective or sergeant or lieutenant?
You know, sir, I can't get into specifics. I don't do that.
Okay.
You know, I'm a former police officer. I worked 9 years undercover. I wouldn't have made the cases that I made had I not kept confidential sources. And from a journalistic standpoint, investigative journalist, I can't tell you. I can tell you that I called the Homicide Division and was told by the Homicide Division, just like in the report, that they were not investigating the case. It was being investigated by the Force Investigation Team. That's what I put in the newspaper.
Okay. I totally understand that. I respect that.
On December 8, 2017, the Baltimore Post-Examiner published my story titled, Las Vegas Police Launch Internal Probe into Leaks and Promise to Release a Report on Shooting Next Month. In that story, I wrote that the Baltimore Post-Examiner was the first to report and question why the Force Investigation Team was investigating mass killer Stephen Paddock's death and not the Homicide Division, which triggered the Internal Affairs investigation. In that article, I wrote that I received information that the crime scene photographs of the rifles in the room that were leaked to Boston 25 TV were leaked by one of Sheriff Lombardo's command staff officers. Folks, I will be discussing all this in detail in a future episode. This October will be the 5-year anniversary of the 2017 Las Vegas massacre. I will say this now. Back in 2017, right after the massacre, Sheriff Lombardo and his then undersheriff, Kevin McMahill, expressed their anger about the releasing of the Paddock crime scene photographs to the press and admitted in a press briefing that there was an internal investigation ongoing. Both Lombardo and McMahill made those statements while FBI Las Vegas Division Special Agent in Charge Aaron Rouse stood adjacent to them. Last year, I received information from sources with knowledge of the 2017 Internal Affairs investigation that Sheriff Lombardo wanted criminal charges to be filed against those who compromised the integrity of the criminal investigation into the worst mass shooting to date and the largest homicide investigation in the history of the Las Vegas Metro Police. Sources said suspicion fell on members of the entry team who breached Paddock's Mandalay Bay Hotel suite on the night of October 1st. They were low-level supervisors and rank-and-file cops. According to what I was told, Sheriff Lombardo ordered the Internal Affairs investigation to be halted, shit-canned, covered up, when it was discovered that it was indeed Lombardo's own command staff officers who were involved in the leaking of the photographs. So, Lombardo would have burned other cops, but protected his command staff officers. I was told that the Internal Affairs detective who was working feverishly at the time on the investigation, and who was under tremendous pressure to find out who leaked the photographs, transferred out of the Internal Affairs Bureau in disgust because of the cover-up. Like I said, I will have full exposure and an entire episode on this, another Sheriff Lombardo cover-up at a later date. If you remember, Sheriff Lombardo told 8 News Now Las Vegas in November of 2017 that they would never be able to find out who leaked the crime scene photographs. No surprise that Lombardo, once again, lied. Here is a question I have for the FBI that will most likely never get answered. The FBI was involved in the joint investigation of the Las Vegas massacre with Las Vegas Metro Police. Special Agent in Charge Aaron Rouse, did Sheriff Lombardo inform you of the results of the Internal Affairs investigation? And if not, why? And now, my closing comments. Las Vegas FBI Division Special Agent in Charge Aaron Rouse retired last week. Sheriff Lombardo over the years has bragged to the Las Vegas media about his transparency. Lombardo's transparency, just like his accountability and integrity, are non-existent. For too many years, the elected sheriffs of Clark County, Nevada, who run the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, through their designated underlings, have engaged in a pattern and practice of cronyism, cover-ups, and the unjustified targeting of police officers. Detectives and supervisors over the years who were assigned to the Internal Affairs Bureau and the Criminal Intelligence Section have transferred out of those units because they could no longer stomach what they were ordered to do. Rank-and-file police officers and supervisors who have spoken to me over the years have stated that the elected sheriffs have two sets of behavior that are acceptable in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. One for cops who have the juice and or the hook with the brass, and the cops who do not. You just heard in this episode a few examples of what has occurred. I will be exposing much more in future episodes. All the dirty little secrets that have been buried for years will now be rising to the surface, because Lombardo wants to be the governor of Nevada, and Kevin McMahill wants to be the next Clark County sheriff. They both have a lot of explaining to do on many things. Allegations of impropriety and or criminal conduct involving Lombardo's off-road racing, his time as a field training officer, and his time with the narcotics section have been raised by police personnel. Kevin McMahill also has a checkered past involving his interactions with females. By the way, McMahill, who won the fight at the Westgate Hotel in 2015 that you and your drinking buddy, former Assistant Sheriff Todd Fasulo, witnessed while off-duty? Was it then Homicide Lieutenant Ray Stiver or the other guy? Correct me if I'm wrong, but how did you order a detective to go to the residence of the other person involved in the physical altercation and issue him a misdemeanor citation for battery when the detective didn't witness the crime? Care to comment? And Lombardo, how did your then Assistant Sheriff get a free pass on the drunk driving incident in his departmental vehicle at the airport area in 2017? According to sources, he was driven home after the Airport Bureau Sergeant responded to the scene. I know these are minor inconsistencies, Lombardo, but the fact is, other cops have lost their careers over similar incidents. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department operates without any external oversight, and there lies the problem. In Las Vegas, who is guarding the guardians, folks? Remember to hit the red subscribe button. Support my independent investigative journalism at paypal.me/DougPoppa. Audio podcasts of all episodes available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Radio Public, and other platforms. Thanks for listening. Much more to come.